Hello good people, I'm Dmitry, and today you and I have a really cool opportunity to check out an upcoming ITX enclosure from iBuypower, who, as you know, make high-end systems for gaming and production work and all that stuff, but now they're getting into making cases, and this is where the Revolt 3 comes in. They have showcased this case at CES, and that was called the Revolt 3 Mark III, but they've dropped the Mark III name, so now it's just the Revolt 3 for the model name. iBuypower will be selling the case as a standalone product under a different sub-brand, but also will be including the Revolt 3 in their own full-on systems too. The expected release date is around July 2021, hopefully. And this next part is really important and pretty major for iBuypower, where you guys come in. So let us know in the comments whether or not you would like to see the case with an included power supply for around $200, and that would be an SFX L unit with 700 watts and gold rated power supply, or case only around $90. Both of those have their advantages, like pre-routed cables already out of the box and you're ready to build if the power supply is included, or use an existing power supply that you already have on hand, SFX or SFXL, and still utilize the Revolt X, Revolt 3. And the second point of feedback from you guys would be the color mesh at the front, whether you'd like it black, silver, or kind of whitish looking, or gold. I'm leaning towards either the black or the silver because the silver does match other elements around the enclosure, but the gold, I mean, in a warm environment, it feels cozy, it feels quite unique, but it doesn't really match the rest of the enclosure. But let us know which one looked best to you in the comments. Power your system with incredible power, the Dark Power 12 from Be Quiet. With the highest efficiency rating possible, 80+ titanium certification, impressive Silent Wings frameless fan cooling, and overclocking key to switch between single and multi-rail operation, and fully modular cables. Check it out below. Alright, so let's begin with the size. When it comes to towering ITX form factors, the size is quite important. So in terms of liters, it's 18.4 liters. So it's slightly bigger than the H1, bigger than the Meshilicious, and bigger than my Corsair 1, and actually approaching the size of the Sugo SG14 and SG15 from Silverstone. But it's really that narrow form factor that kind of slims down the case visually. So in terms of design, we have this vertical tower with some resemblance to the now recalled NZXT H1. Ventilation is all around with no glass option available, so kind of following the Meshilicious steps with this square ventilation on all panels with larger cutouts on the GPU side, which is your front side. That is also the side where the colored mesh will be placed. It is metal, it's quite coarse, so not exactly like a dust filter, and it is a bit of an airflow barrier too, as you'll see later. As for all other sides, they are dustproof with these coarse magnetic filters that slide into each panel, and all panels are toolless and remove with ease. The only branding element is at the front with the iBuypower text, and on these convenient retractable headphone holders, which are available on both sides. They are low profile, offer good functionality, but a bit scratchy when you pull them out, but this still is a prototype, so hopefully that will be fixed in the mass production. The next element I appreciate is the handle. It's on this push to release mechanism and can hold the weight of the entire system no problem, although it would be nice to actually have the kilogram capacity somewhere underneath the handle to give you a bit more confidence about like how much it can carry. I love the inclusion of a power switch at the back. We don't normally see this with power extensions, but it's nice to not need to switch the PSU on off on the actual power supply inside. You know, just turn that on and you have this on off functionality on the case instead. The front I/O is adequate with dual USB 3s, a 4-pole headset jack, and this USB-C Gen 2 port, which turns out to be an extension that you must plug into your motherboard I/O instead of the internal USB-C. Alright, editor Dmitry here. We've been just informed by iBuypower that they are thinking about including a separate Type-C for the internal connection, and that swap will require only 2 screws, which is kind of cool because now you can either plug it into the motherboard I/O or into the internal USB port, which is something smart. I haven't seen any other company do that. We saw the Raw S1 include the USB-C extension into the motherboard, but I like this dual approach. All right, back to the video. All right, so let's move inside, and I find this to be a really clever layout to utilize room for the largest components and really user-friendly design. So the included power supply is up top with pre-routed cables, support for SFX or SFXL. The ITX motherboard is going to be underneath with the I/O facing down. Triple slot GPU on the side without the need for a riser cable, and that's a big plus for new ITX cases to avoid cost and also compatibility issues. As you know, with Gen 4, Gen 3 riser cables, they might introduce some black screens and you have to pop things out, and I appreciate there's nothing like that here. We have good radiator support as well for the CPU with a swivel radiator bracket that supports 240 and 280mm radiators with standard 35mm thickness for the radiator, with total about 58mm of clearance available. So your standard compatibility with the radiator and a set of fans. You can also install a CPU tower heatsinks up to 140mm in height. As for storage, we have two 2.5-inch SSDs behind the GPU with this large cutout in the middle for your SATA cables, and a 3.5-inch mechanical drive slot beside the power supply. So this space is actually really useful for storing your cables instead of the hard drive, but the option is there if you need it. And here's the full spec rundown on screen. It's quite impressive for a case under 20 liters, but also nothing out of the ordinary. Like, this is the type of compatibility we've come to expect from cases of this size, and it's just a matter of like, how is the user experience and what's the cooling like? That really separates one case from another. As for the assembly, can I just say how nice it is to have all your ITX length cables already pre-installed? I guess that is one of the major advantages of having a power supply already included in the enclosure, because some SFX power supplies still have those massive long cables. Here, everything is that ITX length. There's no extra, things you have to slide somewhere and find room for. Everything is sort of pre-cut to your ITX system. But I really do not like working with this style of cable, which are that low profile, really stiff cables that are really difficult to compress and like stash away in places because of that already dense cable. Beside that, the only other hurdle was the pump installation, because you need to rotate the pump to twirl the tubes so they don't hit the fans. Also, there's no way to actually lock the radiator bracket in the open position, so I would actually recommend you install the pump and rotate the radiator and then only install it onto the radiator bracket, which by the way is removable, so you could go that route, but still be nice to have the radiator bracket kind of lock in the open position so it's not constantly falling down. The GPU space is large and roomy and open from all sides with accessible screw points. The PCI power cables exit from 3 different locations near the power supply, and this cable cover at the very top to compress your PCI cables with 2 positions, accommodating really long GPUs and standard length cards too, making sure that the PCI cables don't bulge out and prevent from that side panel from closing. Smart design, I appreciate it. Cable management is mostly fine. I don't like how the front I/O cables, so your USB 3, audio, and power cables cannot pass underneath the motherboard since there's no cutout, so they must cross the motherboard instead. Cables exiting the power supply also have very little room until that cable cover in front of it, and this PSU guard bulges with all the cables that prevents it from locking into that lower position. And this pushes into the GPU space a little bit, and it's a bit uncomfortable. This is one of those things that is kind of expected, I guess, on a prototype, but 100% needs to be refined on a mass-produced sample. Editor Dmitry here once again. So iBuypower will be reinforcing that whole power supply shroud in front of the power supply, so it will be more sturdy, it will not bulge out, and it will actually have a little clip at the bottom so it can go into the motherboard tray instead of it popping out occasionally. One more thing is that you can remove the top panel where you can reveal these dual fan slots. In fact, they are mutually exclusive fans for 80mm, so you can install it either on the left or the right side, and this will help with GPU cooling. And this bracket will be removable if you're not using that space for fans, and it will give you a little bit extra clearance for GPUs. Having said that, temperatures overall are under control, but I would love to see better dust filters included all around to improve performance. These coarse filters are quite cheap and they block a lot of air. I would love to see high performance fine mesh like we see on the Corsair 4000 and 5000 series to be included here instead. And when we look at the performance versus my entire ITX stack in this prototype stage, it's a little bit underwhelming for the CPU, while the GPU is perfectly fine and under control. When you have no other means of exhausting the air but the radiator, it does mix in with the heat output from the GPU, which explains the hotter temperature versus the Razer Tomahawk ITX, where I used the same cooler, but there was an additional 120mm exhaust fan. Also with the Revolt 3, the top radiator fan is mainly blocked by the hard drive cage, and I would love to see a slight redesign of the bracket to slide down that 240mm radiator, so to give us a little bit of extra clearance on the interior. So for the conclusion, a reminder, I would love to hear your feedback on case for $90 versus case plus the power supply for around $200, and which one you would go for and why. Plus the color option for the front mesh on the GPU side. Your thoughts would be appreciated. So overall, my experience has been quite positive with this prototype. You know, it checks off many boxes for like a fresh 2021 ITX release in terms of triple slot graphics cards, up to a 280 Radiator on the inside. Overall, good cooling. I love the handle. I love the addition of headphone holders on either side, and the overall accessibility and user-friendly design is all there. It definitely needs refinement. This is something we've communicated to iBuypower already, but for like a standalone $90 ITX towering vertical enclosure, I think it's pretty competitive. So let us know what you think of the Revolt 3 in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Check out this other relevant content. Subscribe for more. I'll talk to you in the next video.